Welcome to Fear-Free Childbirth Podcast with Alexia Leachman, the weekly 9-month podcast to help parents-to-be look forward to their fear-free childbirth. Alexia is a pregnancy and head trash clearance coach and the author of Fear-Free Childbirth, How to Have a Stress-Free Pregnancy and a Positive, Pain-Free Birth. As a mum who's had 2 fear-free and pain-free births, Alexia wants to share with you how she overcame her pregnancy and childbirth fears so that you can look forward to having a fear-free birth too. Over the 9-month life of this podcast, Alexia will be sharing some real-life stories from mums and dads, insights into the latest childbirth research, inspiring tales from birth professionals, and some tips and techniques for clearing your fears and stresses. If you would like to receive a free chapter from her book, then head over to fearfreechildbirth.com, where you can also sign up for her email series, How to Have a Stress-Free Pregnancy. But now, it's time for the show.
Hello and welcome back to the Fear-Free Childbirth Podcast. This is me, your host, Alexia Leachman. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, here we are at episode 37. I can't quite believe it. We're nearly at the end of season 1 of the Fear-Free Childbirth Podcast. So only a few more weeks to go. It's really, I can't quite believe it. Anyway, on today's show, I'm going to be sharing with you a positive birth story. But it's a positive birth story with a difference. Today, I'm going to be sharing a story from Lisa. And Lisa is going to be sharing how she turned her pregnancy around from being completely fearful and probably tocophobic, which is an extreme fear of childbirth. And she turned that around to have an amazing positive birth. But what makes this story different is that she used fearless birthing. Fearless birthing is the birth preparation approach that I've been developing over the last few years. And I used myself as a guinea pig to come up with all the stuff that helped me to clear my own very, very deep-rooted fears. Now, when I was close to giving birth just over a year ago, Lisa got in touch with me saying, she just found out that she was pregnant and she was absolutely terrified, and she'd heard about the work that I was doing and asked if there was anything that I could possibly do to help. Now, given that I was sort of on the verge of giving birth and having a little newborn around, I wasn't able to do a lot for her at the time, but what I did have was some of the fearless birthing meditations that I'd created to help other women that had been getting in touch with me since they'd found out that I'd been doing this kind of work. So I sent her one of my fearless birthing meditations, and I must have sent her a couple. I can't remember. It was such a long time ago now, and I had nappies and newborn stuff on my mind, so it's all a bit vague. But it really, really helped her. And so today I'm going to be speaking to Lisa all about how her pregnancy went and how she had an amazing birth. Now, I hadn't spoken to her at all since giving her these meditations. So the chat that I have with her today is it's not planned. It literally is me finding out exactly how she got on with it. So I'm pleased to say it went really, really well. And she did have an incredible birth. But what's really interesting that I think some of you will want to hear, or at least find interesting to hear, is that she did try hypnobirthing, and for her, hypnobirthing didn't work. Now, this mirrors my own experience with hypnobirthing, and I know it works very, very well for many, many women. But for myself, I know how I had very deep-rooted fears, and when I tried hypnobirthing, it simply wasn't touching the sides. It really didn't do it for me. And this is what Lisa says as well. She says that hypnobirthing really wasn't helping her, and in fact it annoyed her. But what she really appreciated about fearless birthing was it really tackled some of her fears head on and allowed her to embrace them. So I'm not going to sort of go too much into that right now. I have got a podcast episode coming up about fearless birthing where I'm going to dive down deep and talk more about that. So if you're interested, then you just stay tuned and I'll be sharing a lot more about fearless birthing. And if you want to sign up for my Fearless Birthing 3-part video series that I'll be launching imminently once I get round to reshooting the videos that failed first time round, then get your name on the list, on the waiting list to get those videos ASAP. And there'll be links to all this within the podcast show notes for today's episode, which you'll be able to find at fearfreechildbirth.com/fearless Lisa. That's Lisa, fearless Lisa. And so you'll be able to get links for everything that we mentioned today on the podcast, because Lisa does share a bunch of really great stuff that she used that helped her during her pregnancy as well. So without further ado, this is the time that I spoke to Lisa all about her wonderful, positive birth experience and how she cleared her birthing fears using fearless birthing. I hope you enjoy it. Well, thank you, Lisa, so much for joining me on the Fear-Free Childbirth podcast. I can't wait to hear your story. So you've come here to share your positive birth story. But before we kick off and talk all about that, would you mind just telling everybody a little bit about who Lisa is and what Lisa's into?
Sure. I'm Lisa, obviously. I met you obviously through my interest in personal development. So I've done a bit of training in coaching and NLP. And flexibly patterning, thought field therapy, some of which I use in my job as a careers advisor. I work in a college where I do a bit of coaching and employability training with young people, and a lot of the training I've done is so useful in working with the young people that I do to get them ready for jobs or interviews and things like that. Obviously I'm not working at the moment. I stopped work in January to have my son, who's now 7 months old. Before I lost all my free time, just trying to think what I used to do. I used to really enjoy travel, culture, eating out, meeting new people. Married my husband my husband a year ago. We've been together 4 years. Okay. We met through swimming. So.
I'm going to just first start off by asking you, what was it like when you first found out that you were pregnant?
It was a massive and very positive shock. Basically, like I said, we got married. It was just over a year ago now, actually. Came back from honeymoon. We decided we were at a point we were ready to be trying, and thought we'd have a lovely 6 months of just seeing how things go. And I took a pregnancy test the day that we flew home from our honeymoon, and there we were. I'm going to be 3 very shortly. So wow. It was quite a surprise. I sort of had it in my head that it might take quite a bit longer than that, because I'd seen a few friends struggle, and so I just thought, it's not going to happen overnight, so I've got to be patient. So it really felt like a shock, but a really, really positive one, like a gift. So
when you got over that, I mean, I sort of having a shock at the beginning of that's very much how I felt as well. How long did it take you to kind of sort of calm down after the shock, or sort of kind of get over it and kind of think, oh crap, I'm pregnant, kind of thing?
I'd say it was probably a couple of weeks where nothing felt real. Yeah. I can't be. It's just too, it's not possible. It's so quick. How is that possible? But then I suppose within a couple of weeks it started to sink in. I was starting to do things differently. I wasn't, suddenly I wasn't drinking alcohol. I love a glass of wine on a Friday night or 3. And suddenly it was like, no, I can't do that. I think what also made it a lot more real very quickly was we were in a 1-bedroom flat in South London, and it was like, well, we can't stay here. So we very quickly activated a house search. Because we knew we had to, be somewhere bigger quite soon. So I guess that those things like that helped it set in, maybe sooner than someone who isn't in that situation, if that makes sense.
So I'm thinking now you're pregnant and you're now looking at houses, and so you've got the whole moving thing going on. Did you find a property, and was that all kicking off while you were pregnant then?
It was indeed. We did a search. I think it wasn't even just that we had to find a house in an area we didn't even know where we wanted to move to, because we were going to take this lovely 6 months of trying and areas. It was all mapped out. So now it was more like, okay, we've got a month or two to find which area we want to be in, and then which houses, what kind of house we're looking for in that area. And we did find something. I'd fallen pregnant towards the end of June, and we found something that we were supposed to move into in October, the end of October last year, but unfortunately it fell through, which is what you want when you're
No.
So that didn't work out, unfortunately, but we proceeded with the sale of our flat and rented.
Right.
So that's move number 1. We did manage to find something literally towards Christmas time of last year, which meant we made our second move after a short-term renting into our now house 5 weeks before I had my son.
Oh my goodness. So that's the backdrop for your pregnancy, basically, this kind of crazy stress of moving, looking for somewhere to live and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, 2 big moves with a bump. That was quite interesting.
So how was your pregnancy then, in terms of, I imagine, did that distract you from what was going on in terms of your body and all that kind of stuff? Or were you able to connect to your pregnancy and I don't know, feel the changes that was all going on through the trimesters?
I think I did. I definitely sort of, noticed different things, different sensations and differences to non-pregnancy and how things were developing. But looking back, I probably didn't spend half as much time preparing, not until the end anyway, the last sort of month, I'd say, month or two. I just didn't spend enough time connecting, preparing, getting in touch with the bump.
Yeah.
Because I suppose, like you say, I was quite distracted, looking at houses, packing boxes twice. And, it was only really at the end, I think I got to really enjoy that kind of, I'm pregnant, there's, here's my bump and, that nesting period of getting everything ready. That was lovely once we're actually in the house. But I guess, had we not have moved twice, I probably could have done all that a bit sooner.
Yeah.
So, I got to enjoy I'd say a good chunk of it, but it was.
How did you feel about your impact? Like, it sounds like you had a nice pregnancy, that your symptoms weren't too. Did you get any symptoms? Did you have anything that was troublesome during your pregnancy?
Nothing too bad. There was 2 things really. Earlier in the pregnancy, I was sick between, I think, weeks 7 and 12, and that was interesting, but that passed, which is great. I felt quite normal and fine then. And then towards Christmas of the pregnancy, where I was a lot further gone, I did have some back pain in my lower back, which was actually fixed quite quickly by an osteopath / magician. So nothing too impactful or sort of nothing that spoiled my pregnancy at all.
And how are you feeling about your pregnancy and bump growing and I suppose, becoming a mum and having childbirth to look forward to and all that kind of stuff? How are you feeling about all that during your pregnancy?
I'd say it's just such a massive mix of things. I was excited. Sometimes it proceeded to feel quite surreal. God, is that really happening? Am I really doing this? Am I honestly having a baby? And I'd say knowing I had childbirth to go through was sometimes overshadowed things for me. Not always. I did enjoy things, but sometimes just thinking I have to get through that. As the panic and the fear of it, like almost phobic at some points. That I'd say it was almost like some people fear spiders and snakes. I think mine might have been childbirth.
So tell me a little bit more about that. What was that like for you, this fear of childbirth?
I think it just felt like something, how on earth am I going to get through this? I'm going to be completely out of control and exposed, and it's going to be, people describe it so negatively so often. So I was sort of like, how am I going to do it? It's almost like I saw my due date and I thought, how am I possibly getting past that? It was almost hard to look past my due date and imagine life beyond it, because it felt like such a Mount Everest to have to go through. So I'd say sometimes it did block off imagining the future, because I would just think up to that date and think, how am I getting past that actual experience of bringing this baby here, when I've got to actually endure all of this thing that people say is terrible and painful and just nothing, there's no pain like it kind of thing. So sometimes that did sort of overtake my thoughts a bit. I'd say up until the last sort of couple of months. So
what did you do then to help you with this fear of childbirth?
So I tried a few different things. I thought, if I try loads of things that I've got covered from every angle.
Share your tools and tips.
So I did simple things like I'd listen to meditations on YouTube, or meditation CDs. That weren't always specific to childbirth, they were just simple meditations, and that was something by the end I was building into nearly every day, just to relax me really. I wanted my husband to get involved in something with me so he could get, he could be equipped as well. So I actually took him along to some hypnobirthing sessions. We had a couple of those maybe 3 months before I was due to have my son. And then I had the lovely podcasts of Fearless Birthing that you kindly sent me and that were brilliant. So those are the main things that I was using.
Oh, the little audios that I sent you?
Yes,
okay.
The audios, yeah.
Okay. And so how did, what do you think helped, what was the thing that made the difference for you in terms of helping you move past your fear?
I'd say the meditation each day got me in a really relaxed sort of present state. So I didn't keep dwelling on it or think. It was almost like it kept it in the future, and I was just in the now, thinking I've got this freedom for the last couple of weeks, so just enjoy it. And I think the podcasts created some real shifts for me. I mean, the hypnobirthing went so far and gave some nice exercises, but there was something I couldn't move past very easily with it, which I think Fearless Birthing took.
Do you mean the audios I sent you, those little audios?
The audios, yeah, sort of gave me a nice, the perspective that works better for me, to be honest. So with hypnobirthing, I don't know if you've practiced any or if you've experienced much of it, but it's all about, it's not pain, it's discomfort, and imagine taking petals off a flower, and it's all about almost denying that there's pain, and just calling it other things like discomfort. And for some reason that just didn't work for me. I sort of thought, actually, I've been told a lot of times it is painful, and I don't want to pull the wool over my eyes here and sort of go in and think, oh, it's just going to be discomfort, and then be in agony. So I thought, actually, how about I embrace this pain and I start to look at it as something to love, or something to really, think is a positive thing. And I get okay with that pain, rather than trying to think, oh, it's not going to be pain, it's just a little twinge or discomfort, So I think the podcast started to help me to do that, to get a bit in love with the pain and embrace that, and sort of think, well, what does that represent, and all these positive things it represents. And a bit more neutrality with it, rather than brushing under the carpet this concept of pain or calling it something else. I for some reason that just didn't work so well.
So just to benefit the listeners, when I was developing a lot of what I'm doing now, I sent some of my early stuff to Lisa to try out. And so Lisa's referring to some of these audios that are now part of my Fearless Birthing program. So so you're saying that some of this stuff really helped you to kind of embrace what you were feeling and really sort of be okay with it. And when we talk about, you use the word neutrality, if anybody listening is not sure what we mean by neutrality, I've got a blog post that explains what that is, but it's basically where you're getting rid of any excess negative emotional energy around something there. You're just okay with it, and there's just no fear there. You're just, would that be how you described it when you felt neutrality around the pain idea?
Yeah, I think it was, and I think it was giving it a new representation. Like, my husband used to kindly say to me, look, sweetheart, you're on a train and you can't really get off it, so you've got to start to love this train ride and think you're going to see it through to the end, because that is what's happening. So I suppose it was starting to love that train ride, to take that analogy.
That's further. A great analogy, that one.
Yeah, like, you're on a one-way train. Learn to, and sort of, just learn to love that train and what you get when your journey the end. I think I got more into the mode of thinking like that in those last weeks or month or so, where I was sort of listening to these audios, very frequently. Yeah, I listened to it quite a lot. I went into labour with one of the audios.
So I was there in your labour.
You were actually in the first sort of part of my labour.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know that. In my head, these are listened to before labour, not in labour, so this is interesting for me to hear.
I didn't know I was in labour.
Oh, didn't you?
I did think it was a pre-labour, but yeah.
Fantastic. So basically, you kind of made friends with pain. It's what it sounds like.
Yeah, I'd say that was what happened. It's sort of a more of a, it's going to happen, and this is my gift at the end of it. So best pain possible. And actually, there's another is it audio or podcast that you'd sent me about our perceptions of pain. I think one of the main messages being, if our attitude towards that pain can alter the level of pain that we experience. So I think it was a bit of attitude shift towards the pain, and remembering that one person's perception is quite different to another. So it may not be that bad, for me, because I could experience pain very differently to the next person, because my attitude is starting to shift towards pain. It might not be like someone who's just sat there saying it's going to be awful, I'm going to hate it, and so a bit of perception change was very powerful as well.
So how was I want to know about the birth. I want to know, but I'm just going to stop myself a little bit. I just want to find out a little bit more about how things were in those last few weeks. Then, what were you doing? You've moved in. You were able to do a bit of nesting. You talked a little bit about pre-labour. Just tell us a little bit about maybe first tell me what your due date was. I'd love to know what your due date was, and then whether or not little one arrived near the due date. I mean, did you have the inductions? Oh, sorry, I've got so many questions for you. I'll slow down. How was those last few weeks then of your pregnancy?
So Dylan was due on the 12th of March. And we moved into the property that we're now in on the 8th of February, which gave me just over 5 weeks.
That's not too bad. Okay.
So in those last few weeks, I'd say it was a combination of getting unpacked, doing the nesting, getting his room ready, sewing curtains, starting to really enjoy the thought of, my gosh, I'm getting, this baby, very soon, and that's so exciting. And I'd particularly in the last 3 weeks, I'd say I was just alternating between meditations, listening to the audio you sent me, the Fearless Birthing track. I think it's maybe an hour, maybe even an hour, just listening to that, and doing little meditations, trying to just do very restful things for myself. A bit of yoga as well, just very nurturing things in those last few weeks, because I thought I haven't nurtured myself enough up until now because I've moved twice. It was a combination really of self-nurture, doing all those relaxing things and getting into a nice state of mind for the birth, a more embracing state of mind, just getting ready for little man to arrive.
So when did things start kicking off for you? How did you know that labour was triggered or had started?
Well, it started actually on my due date. Wow.
I think that's about only 5% of babies are born on their due date, so this is like a very unusual occurrence.
Once again, I sort of talked myself into, much like, it's going to take at least 6 months to sort of be able to get pregnant. I've been like, I'm definitely going to be overdue because my husband was late. I think maybe nearly a week late. His mum was induced with him, so I was like, there's no way he's going to be on time. And I'd sort of talked myself into having a few more weeks, thinking most first babies are always late. So I had an appointment with my midwife on my due date, which is quite standard practice in our surgery, and she just said to me, I sense, she was going to give me a sweep. I'm sure you've probably heard of the delightful process, but she said, I just sense that things aren't far off for you, so unless you desperately want one, then I just wouldn't, and I just would leave things as are. So we sort of went off for a little shop and had a walk, and we're just going to go and think about whether we wanted this done or not, myself and my husband. And as we'd gone to one particular shop to buy dinner, and as we're in there, I just started to get some twinges, like, and I just wasn't sure. But I then came home and just did a bit more relaxation, had your podcast on, and we rang the hospital. I think maybe I can't remember exactly whether I'd maybe stopped for a break of the podcast. I can't remember exactly how it happened, but we'd rang the hospital and they said, because I'd sounded that relaxed and that able to converse, they said, it's either Braxton Hicks or your body's just getting ready for a labour and it's just practicing contracting, but you're not in labour. And I said, they'd said that to me based on me sounding actually quite relaxed and able to converse with them. And that was probably, I don't know, maybe 7 in the evening. We'd got home because I'd been twinging like that for a couple of hours. But the evening carried on, and I just kept having these contractions. I think I've managed to kip. Again, I was listening to your podcast and that, so it was so relaxing to fall asleep. But I woke up to still having these sort of quite regular twinges. So I got in the bath, I think by now it's sort of 10, 11 at night. And my husband was like, these aren't stopping, so I'm going to start tracking you. Just bless him, he'd done his homework ready for, take her in and all of this. Man. And he goes, you seem fine, but you're having 3 every 10 minutes. And that, according to my guidance, is when I'm taking you in the car. So he just whisked me off to the hospital, and it just sort of kicked off from there, really. I'd been very sort of calm and not really believing I was in labour, and not really being believed by hospital staff that I was in labour, until we actually arrived there, and I was then being examined. So it sort of all really took off and became more, the real McCoy there. So.
And how was that? I mean, how did your contractions maintain their regularity in the car journey and on the way to the hospital? Or did they slow down a bit?
No, they were really quite consistent, I'd say, the whole evening long. And looking back, I was in labour, and in the very early stages of labour, since I was in that shop where I was like, I don't know, and all the way through that phone call where they were saying, oh no, you're not, and then when we got to the hospital, I was in very early labour. I was 3 centimetres dilated, at which point they were saying, oh, it's probably best for you to go home because this could go on for hours and hours and hours and you're more comfortable at home. But both myself and my husband just didn't feel right about leaving the hospital. We just had a bit of a hinge that it just wasn't the right thing to do. So they persuaded us into going out for quite a long walk. But 50 minutes or just under an hour later, I was sort of telling my husband I sort of had immense feelings of pressure, wanting to start to give lots of detail. And he was like, we need to step back into the hospital. And lo and behold, at that point, only an hour after my first examination, I was actually at 10 centimetres.
Oh my goodness.
Dilation. I mean, I had noticed that things had cranked up a notch, but I'd just been literally circling the car park, so I hadn't noticed just how much. So yeah, on the second examination, they're like, look, everything's pretty much bypassed. The delivery room's over there. Off we go. So yeah, it's the quickest established labour.
Goodness.
Yeah.
So then, I would imagine within that half an hour or something, it all started. Little one was there, was he? Did you?
Yeah, I think it was a further sort of 45 minutes, an hour, no more than an hour, definitely. Then he was in my arms. Yeah.
So that moment when tell us about the sort of that final. The final push, as it were, the final stretch. How did I don't mean to use those kind of words, but
No, but they're quite
they do fit, don't they?
I just found it. I mean, I was definitely aware it's happening. It wasn't, like being tickled. Let's be real, but it wasn't this awful thing that I'd earlier imagined in my pregnancy at all. It was quite manageable. Like that's not to say it didn't hurt. But it was. I think the mindset just made it so manageable, and it was quite a privilege to go through it. At the risk of sounding naff, it was quite an honour to go through it, just knowing where it was leading all the time, and then that final moment, where he came out. It was just, it's just so many mixed emotions all at the same time, like pure, exhilaration. I felt quite elated. I was like, oh my gosh, has that really just happened so fast? And a bit of shock. Just there was so much going on all at once, but I just remember just feeling so elated,
sort of buzzing.
And just gosh, he's here and he's safe, and just glad. But I felt like I climbed a mountain of something I was so frightened of doing, and it just happened so naturally and quickly, and it was almost like I dreamt it, that it had gone that smoothly. And I'd escaped stitches as well, which I was absolutely...
So it was totally natural, no drugs, no gas and air, no...
There was gas and air.
Okay.
Yeah, the midwife, because I'd sort of gone from, dilations of 3 to 10 centimetres so fast, she sort of thought the gas and air would help to give me a bit of Dutch courage, she called it. Because it went from, I'm in labour and I've got hours, to I've got to go and do this right now. So she thought it would give me a bit of a boost. Yeah. And actually I did love gas and air. I loved it. It was,
so while you're going through, I mean, it all sounded like it all sort of took off very, very quickly towards the end. Were you were you doing anything, like, I don't know, in your head saying stuff to yourself, or were you, what were you doing? Obviously labouring, but, I don't know, like, were you saying, did you have kind of stuff that you're listening to, music, or were you saying mantras, or were you doing breathing? I don't know, like anything like that you might have learned maybe in your hypnobirthing courses, or what were you kind of doing? Or were you just kind of so connected to your body that none of that was happening at all?
I think because of the speed of it, we barely opened the hospital bags, which did have all of these things. Like I had some nice mantras and, almost fearless birthing sort of feel to them. With, this pain represents an amazing sort of, love this pain because it represents meeting yourself. All these lovely sort of notes to myself with pictures of my friends' kids who I've got a lovely relationship with. And I had all these things ready to look at, and I had some downloads on my iTunes and all of this, but there was just no time to even open all of that. Sort of looking back to that hour around the car park was it's a bit of a blur, but I think it was just me wanting to move all the time and just sort of, I think maybe I was just telling myself whenever I sort of had a moment to gather myself, just, it's okay. And I think, just my husband was so incredibly calm. He was giving me little reminders that I'd asked him to do as well. But it just went by so fast. It's quite hard to sort of remember exactly what I was doing. And
you do kind of lose track, don't you? That anything, I know. You just go into this kind of bubble of this birthing bubble, and time doesn't mean anything, and you wouldn't. So I do understand that, but a lot of women I speak to do say, I was kind of doing this and that. So I'm just curious as whether you're actively kind of doing anything, or other than labouring, obviously. So that's amazing. So basically, it sounds like it was intense. It was manageable. Went really quick. You felt amazing after. So what about the bit soon after birth, skin to skin, breastfeeding? How did all that kind of stuff go?
So the skin to skin was lovely. That happened straight away. One thing the midwife picks up on straight away is that Dylan had a tongue tie. I'd never heard of it. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, no, my second one had that, and I'd never heard of it either, where their tongue can't breastfeed properly, can it? Because it can't reach out too far.
Unfortunately not, and his was quite significant. So she did actually say you may have some trouble with breastfeeding and off for now. So the breastfeeding sort of stuff didn't kick in until the next morning. He was born at 2:20 in the morning, and it didn't really kick in until later, in the daytime, when we managed one latch. But from then on, it was just too troublesome for him to really feed. So we ended up having to stay in the hospital a couple of extra days to try and sort it out. But really, it was me expressing and feeding him by a bottle because the latch was just too difficult to establish.
And I'm just wondering how he, given the such a lovely birth that he had, I'm just curious to know how he is. Did he, in terms of his demeanour, I guess, and is he calm? Does he cry a lot? Did he sleep well? And that kind of thing, really.
Well, at the beginning, when we were really trying very hard when we got home to keep up this breastfeeding attempts, and a health visitor came round and recommended cranial osteopath session, because she said it can sometimes help with breastfeeding, and also as it had been a quick birth for him, maybe it would, if he had sort sort of gone through any trauma or shock, it might calm him down. But actually, when we took him to the cranial osteopath locally, she was like, she just said there's nothing to treat. He's just he's in such good conditions and shape. Everything's just operating perfectly, and it wouldn't be right to take your money. So even though we weren't managing to feed him in the way that I'd really hoped to, it was so reassuring to hear that actually everything for him was, well, and he was in a brilliant sort of form after that, and the breastfeeding wasn't changing that. I'd say his temperament is just quite joyful, apart from when he's hungry or it's bedtime, and he doesn't always want to go to sleep because he hates missing out. He loves people, so bed to him is a killjoy time. His temperament is very sort of smiley, very happy, quite content little boy, really. He's got energy. He's 7 months. He's been trying to crawl for the last 3 weeks. He's very close. So he's a typical physical boy, just like his daddy was apparently. And I think because he's a boy with lots of energy, he still gets a bit hungry at night time. So not going through, but he's not a wake up by the hour kind of a baby. We've got it okay, I'd say. But he's just been a delight. He's got a lovely smiley demeanour, and people just seem to take to him. I think because he loves people so much, he'll give a smile and he just charms his pants off everyone.
They're adorable, aren't they?
We often say we're very lucky because he is a happy soul. So,
Well, it's been absolutely amazing listening to your story, and I'm just wondering now, if there's for a pregnant mum listening to this now, what would you sort of say to her if you could sort of share? What would you have done differently if you could do that again, and you could maybe have improved? I mean, it sounds like there's nothing there to improve, but if you could have done something differently, what would you say to somebody else who's maybe got a bit more time to plan or to do something in their pregnancy to help them have a positive experience and get rid of their fear?
I'd say don't move twice.
Top tip.
I just say take as much time as you possibly can to nurture yourself and really, really look into things that can help, because my last month or so of pregnancy really wasn't as fearful as the months that had gone before that, because I was taking measures like listening to your lovely podcasts and doing little bits of meditation or pregnancy yoga. I say just take as much time as possible to nurture yourself and do invest into those things. Take that time for yourself, because it really does make a difference. And just changing your perception through things like fearless birthing, meditation, whatever it is that works, and for each individual person, it really does make a difference to the perception of that pain. And I'd also say try and seek out positive birth stories as well, because I think the one thing going on sometimes out there is people will more commonly share a negative birth story than a positive one. If it just went fine, then maybe you don't hear about it very much, whereas people often share their negative experiences, which can really add to the fear. So there's actually a website called Tell Me a Positive Birth Story, and I found it so great to just go on there and just read a couple of this was lovely and this was lovely and this was fine. And so just try and surround yourself with people who'll tell you good, their positive stories, or seek out stories that are positive, because there are a lot of them out there.
There are. And don't watch One Born Every Minute.
I actually was banned from watching. I didn't want to watch it anyway. I refused to watch it. My husband's like, please don't get anywhere near that, or at least until you've had our baby. So that was off limits.
Yeah. And for those listening, I have got a campaign. I've got a petition at the moment that the people that behind Channel 4, behind One Born Every Minute, should sort of stop doing things like this and portray childbirth in a more balanced way, rather than all this negativity and all this scaremongering that shows like One Born Every Minute do. So I'll put a link to the petition in the show notes as well for today's podcast, because I truly believe that pregnant women shouldn't be allowed anywhere near that show.
No, and not if they want more children.
No, exactly. And that's the tragedy in all this, is that, a fearful experience can lead to such difficulties in birth, and then some mums then decide not to have any more after that, or they have that experience that stays with them forever, and that's the real tragedy here. So it's brilliant that that you were able to sort of do stuff to get rid of your fear, and that you had an amazing birth experience by the sounds of it. You're really, really lucky. Amazing. Well done. Well, thank you, Lisa, for coming on and sharing your story. I'm sure there's been lots there for other mums to listen to and get inspired by. So thanks for sharing your story with me today. It's been fabulous. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Lisa and her tale of using fearless birthing to help her to prepare for her wonderful, wonderful birth. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, you can find out more about fearless birthing on next week's podcast. I'm going to be diving down deep and talking a lot more about it. And in fact, after our chat, Lisa and I carried on talking about a little bit more about how exactly it worked for her, and why, what it was that was working really well for her and really, really helped her. So I'm going to include some of that in the podcast for next week, so you can hear her talking a lot more about it. I think you'll find it really, really useful, especially if you're somebody that is really fearful of birth. There are different levels of fear when it comes to birth. There's sort of the fear that arises from just not knowing much about the birth process, which those fears are easily allayed just by educating yourself. But other fears are just so deep rooted that no matter how much education you do, you still are absolutely terrified. So it's people like that, if that's you, then this is going to be really, really helpful for you, to help you to clear your fears. If you want to find out more about fearless birthing, then you can sign up to find out get the 3 3-part video series that I'll be launching very soon. So the link for that is at fearfreechildbirth.com/fearless Lisa, where you'll find the show notes for today's episode, as well as links to all the things that Lisa shared during our chat. So if you want to find out anything more about today's chat, then it's /fearless Lisa. I hope you've enjoyed the show today, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in. You've just been listening to Alexia Leachman from the Fear-Free Childbirth podcast. If you enjoyed the show, she'd really love it if you left a review on iTunes or Stitcher, or shared it with a friend. And don't forget, to get a free chapter from her book, head over to fearfreechildbirth.com to get your copy, as well as finding other episodes in this podcast and more about how Alexia can help you with pregnancy and birth preparation coaching. Until next time.